I have the pleasure of introducing Dr. Trevor Wilkins. He has very many letters behind his name. A few of them are PH and D. Soon he's going to have another PH and D behind his name. So, Dr. Wilkins specializes in the treatment of post-traumatic stress disorder, trauma-related issues, and individuals navigating high-stress careers, with a unique focus on public safety and military personnel grappling with stress and trauma-related disorders, as well as adults affected by childhood trauma. Dr. Wilkins brings a wealth of personal and professional experience to his practice. His extensive background includes 15 years of service in uniformed law enforcement, followed by 3 years as a police dispatcher, firefighter, and emergency medical technician. Dr. Wilkins seamlessly melds his graduate-level education in professional counseling with hands-on experience in handling traumatic situations. He offers counseling services to not only those in public safety and the military, but also to the broader public dealing with the trauma. So please give a warm welcome to the Angry Viking therapist, Dr. Trevor Wilkins.
See you again. That intro makes me sound way cooler than I am. AI wrote it, actually. I love the walk-up music. I typically use Pantera, which is a little more my style, but I don't want them to get copywritten. And we all know that TJ needs no help getting his stuff taken off of YouTube. So it's kind of cool, though, to have that. I think every or most young boys have that WWE dream of being able to walk in with like music and explosions. So next year I'm expecting like explosions and lasers going off. So I don't know, we'll see. So I appreciate you all being here. This is a topic that remains very important to me. Trauma is what we're talking about today, and not just what it does, why it does it, why you may or may not have it. Not everybody does. Whether it rises to the level of things like PTSD or whether it's just events people are dealing with that's still affecting their life in some way. Maybe they don't even know it. But so it's super important because obviously, for whatever reason, you're here for an important thing, right? The whole point of this, it's cool we get some information. It's cool that we can do tug of war. But the whole point of this is, of course, raising money for people that we know are victims of very terrible things. And I have the honor, although this sounds strange when I say it, the honor of getting to work with a lot of those people, whether it's at the time that it happens and their kids, whether they're adults with childhood trauma later in life, because obviously it's going to affect them. And you know that it's important enough that we need the funds in order to do that. Whether you're here for religious reasons, whether you're here to hear some of the speakers, there's been a great lineup so far. It's been great to listen to. I've learned a lot already. You know, at least it starts with the interest that we want to further Caleb House, because it's such an important thing. So that's why I talk about trauma when I come to these. It may not be specific to the trauma that they're dealing with. I want to talk about it more in maybe your own life and what I see and why it's so important to me. So thank you for supporting Caleb House. TJ is one of my best friends in the world. We found each other a very strange way through another business consulting kind of business, and it's been so fun to watch his influence and what he does for people grow. And I know he's done stuff for you guys too. So thank you for supporting all that. So I want to talk about the impact of trauma on the brain. But first I want to tell you how I got here. What are those, why do I have those letters behind my name? And Luke's right, I've actually gone back to school for a second doctorate, this time in a more trauma focused kind of way. I think that learning, if you're going to learn something this specific, it needs to be at the highest level. So some days I regret going back because there's a lot to do, and some days I know that it's teaching me to be better. So I'm very invested. But why? Why I'm invested? He kind of gave you a little bit of a clue into what my history is like. Starting at the age of 16, I started volunteering for our local EMS system. You could be a first responder back then. Back when I started in public safety, what I like to call the 1900s. is when I started. And so at 16, I started doing that. 18, I became an EMT and a dispatcher. 21, I got in law enforcement, did that for 15 years, most of it with the Kentucky State Police. So I had a very wide range of seeing things, dealing with things, and never really felt like the letters PTSD were something I had to worry about. Well, if you'll notice, I said 15 years and not 20 plus years. At 15 years, my career really fell apart. I was losing everything. I'd lost my career. I lost my family at that point. I watched my own cruiser drive out of the driveway of this job that I loved doing and wanted to keep growing. And I went to a couple of therapists because I knew something was going on up here. I wasn't being myself. I was losing everything. And much like most of the people in this room, we're all pretty type A folks that are attracted to this crowd or attracted to the rhetoric that's said at these places. And I thought everybody else was the problem. Clearly, I wasn't. I was just angry all the time. I would say anger is my superpower. I still have to work on it every day. But I did go to a couple of therapists, and to be quite honest, they were terrible. I think one of them actually made me worse. Told me that my trauma and my anger were so bad they didn't know what to do with me and they didn't know where to send me. So now I'm so broken that the pros don't even know how to fix me, and I think that's unacceptable. So I'd like to tell you that this journey to becoming this doctor of psychotherapy and I own a private practice. I've got an online consulting business. I work with some nonprofits. I work with a lot of public safety agencies. I get to do these kind of talks across the nation, which is pretty cool. I'd like to tell you that I did it for a really noble reason, but I didn't. I went back to school to figure out what the heck was wrong with me, because clearly I was becoming part of the problem. And it turned into a really cool job. All these years later, never wanting to go to school again. Turns out I've gone through a lot of school and a lot of trainings. I specialize in a couple of modalities. One of them I'll hit on here in just a minute, not necessarily in a really technical way. I know that's not why everybody's here, but one is called rational motor behavior therapy. I've been very fortunate to train at the Albert Ellis Institute in New York City for that, eventually doing an associate fellowship with them. And then EMDR, which has become a much more popular trauma-based therapy, eye movement desensitization reprocessing. I had the great honor of training under a doctor named Dr. E.C. Hurley, which I, to this day, think was probably one of the best trauma therapists there ever was, especially when it came to military. He was a Vietnam veteran and then went back into the Army after being enlisted in Vietnam and eventually would become a colonel and then became a therapist. So these are the people I like to work with, right? These are the people that think like us. They're not going to pat you on the back and tell you that, that the rest of the world is wrong. They're willing to tell you what you need to change. So that's what makes me do this, because now I see this every day in the people that I talk to. And I want people to know that trauma is more than just a memory. I'm always paranoid wearing one of these that you can hear me swallow the water. No, not too bad. Okay, so trauma is more than just a memory, and I want people to see that. Trauma isn't just what happens to you, it's the response that happens to your brain. It's the changes in that, the changes in your emotions. In fact, it changes your entire life. But let's be clear about what trauma does. You're not your trauma. You're not. The trauma itself is usually what's given to the traumatic event at the time that it happens. Whether you think you've had a 1 out of 10 or a 10 out of 10 of those, everybody's is a little bit different. But you're not your trauma. You're not broken. I'm going to show you how I know this. And you're not a victim forever unless you just decide to stay one. The cost of trauma is pretty big. Trauma completely rewires parts of the brain, but not permanently. And that's the most important part about this. You can take control of dealing with trauma. It does hijack many things, like your survival instincts. It will distort reality. It alters personalities, but only if you let it, because there is a way to get better. I define it the hard way. In fact, unresolved trauma runs your life like a dictator. It will take over. It will become part of almost every part of your life. So what are we going to do about it? What are you going to do about it? Well, some of you, in many of the talks that I do about this across the nation, I know some people are thinking like, I've had hard stuff in my life, but I don't know that I've had trauma. I don't know that I've had things that cause me symptoms now that I think are related to traumatic events. Maybe. If so, great. But I'll tell you it's more prevalent than you think. Because here's how trauma actually presents in my office. There's a little more awareness of things like PTSD or traumatic stress now. So it happens a little bit, but for many years in my office, nobody ever came in and said, I think I have PTSD. I think that all my reactions are because of a traumatic event from years ago. What actually happens with trauma, whether it arises to that level of PTSD, and I'm not interested in necessarily the diagnosis of that today, whether it arises to that or not, or it's just taking over parts of your life. If it's taking over any part of your life, it's a problem. Because here's what it really looks like for trauma in the U.S. Now, I know there's a couple of kids in here. I'm going to talk about a couple of difficult things, not necessarily in detail. I hope you don't have to explain a word or two to them later, so just keep that in mind. But something like this: 1 in 5 Americans were sexually molested as a child. There's way more than 5 people in this room. Do the math. 1 in 5 Americans. 1 in 4 Americans were beaten by a parent to the point of leaving a mark on their body. 1 in 4 Americans grew up with alcoholic relatives. Way more than 4 people in this room. So do the math. In fact, the wives of men who suffer PTSD tend to become depressed. Let me come back to that one in just a second. The children of depressed parents are at risk of growing up insecure and anxious. Having been exposed to family violence as a child often makes it difficult for that child to establish trusting relationships as an adult. Here's why I bring those up. I was getting better. I was doing this for a living. I was starting to get some speaking engagements, and my wife never really could go with me. They'd fly me to where I'm going and fly me back. But I got a local contract where I live to speak to a rural EMS symposium. All the rural agencies come together and do one symposium all together. And then when we come talk for a little bit like this, and she's going to go with me because we're just driving down to it. And about halfway there, I either get like this really cool or really stupid idea. You lived with me during what I call my dark years, and most EMS, especially rural EMS, is a lot of families, right? Dad's a medic, mom's a dispatcher, mom's a medic, dad's a fireman, or vice versa. So would you like to get up and say something about like dealing with me through those years and how we kind of helped get through it? What helped get through it? She said, sure. And about halfway through this talk that I do all the time, with just a couple of bullet points, I have her come up and she's talking, and I remember her saying very clearly to this group that she and the kids used to walk around on eggshells because they never knew what was going to piss Dad off next. Now, I can tell you right now, I've never laid a hand on my wife or kids inappropriately, right? Never. I've punched a few walls, I've thrown her through chairs, I've acted like a moron. But in my head, I haven't done wrong because I've never assaulted my family. Those were the people that I took to jail. Those are the people that were out of control, not me. I was just angry. But to hear her say that kept them walking on eggshells, what was going to make Dad next, that tore me apart. Because if I'm suffering, I'm the big bad guy. I'm the type A dude that does a high-risk job. I'll just deal with it. I'll just deal with it myself. I'm not going to let it affect them. I'm not going to bring it home. I'm not going to let the trauma of life be exposed to them. They have a great life. I give them a great life. And because I never lay a hand on them, I definitely don't impact them in any way with this trauma. Yeah, it turns out I'm wrong. Turns out that me just being tough guy and taking it was actually causing much bigger problems. So it took me to hear that before I realized I affected more than just me. Because, we're tough, right? If I break my leg, I will put a tourniquet on it if it needs it. I will splint it and I'll walk myself to the hospital because I'm a man. But I'm screwing them up, right? I'm causing chaos later in their lives. And here's what it really looks like. I call this the real signs of traumatic stress. People don't come in and talk about PTSD. They come in and talk about anger. They talk about their marriage falling apart. They talk about sadness. They talk about exhaustion. They talk about somatic symptoms, which to us is the technical term for physical symptoms of a mental health disorder, typically. Like irritable bowel syndrome. Are you somebody that's had irritable bowel syndrome for 30 years? Now, maybe you do. I'm not going to negate an MD's diagnosis if they have a good history of you and they know what's going on. But here's the thing about irritable bowel disorder. And if there's any nurses or PAs or doctors in the room, I know I'm not saying this in a medically correct way, but give this some thought. Irritable bowel syndrome. It sounds like kind of the catch-all of, we don't know what's wrong with your stomach, it's just irritable all the time, right? You'd be amazed. Now, I'm not saying that we cure irritable bowel syndrome, but you'd be amazed how many people come to my office and have had IBS for 30 years, and 6 weeks later, it doesn't bother them anymore. It's not because we cured it. If it's a physical problem, it's a physical problem. But what makes these somatic symptoms worse? Stress, trauma, exhaustion, right? So we're just making it worse. Immunity problems. Are you somebody that was never sick? That was me. Never went to the doctor, never sick. And then when I was at my worst, I was sick all the time. Just catching colds constantly dealing with immunity issues. What about sadness not healing like it should? If somebody comes into my office and they've gone through a really hard thing, maybe the loss of a family member or financial stress or a life change or been fired, sad makes sense to me. I don't think we can really fix sad. But what if 6 months later they still feel the same way? That's sadness not healing like it should. We should be able to get back to the things that normalize our life, that we're sad about that event or that loss or the thing that happened, but we don't have to be stuck in that. But if it's not being fixed, you might have a problem. What about substance abuse? And if you think alcohol is the only one, you're a fool, right? Substance abuse, if you need something to feel better, I'm not telling you that psychotropic medications are bad. I think lots of people need psychotropic medications. I know that you need pain pills sometimes when you're at your worst. I'm not going to negate that. That's not my place. But when you become so dependent on it or you can't function in your life, is that a substance abuse problem? It's an individual basis. I'm not going to put a wide umbrella on that. But could it be? Here's one that pops up all the time in my office now. Doc, I think I have ADHD. Now I'll tell you, and I won't go down the rabbit hole, that we've brought a lot more prominence and idea to ADHD, so maybe people are looking into it a little more. I don't know if you have it or not. We'd have to do some testing. But especially the public safety members or people in high stress careers that come in and say, I think I have ADHD, you probably do. I don't know that you clinically have it. We have to do some testing, but think about this. If you've ever worked in those high stress careers, how many times have you driven 110 miles an hour stealing with your knee, shoving a sandwich with your left hand and talking on the radio with your right hand? I hope you have the ability to divide your attention, because that's not going to work, right? There's not multitasking. You can't do multiple things 100%, right? But those high-risk jobs, the things that have kept you out of danger, the things that have made you aware of the things going around you, maybe it is hyperattention. Here's a big one that's horrible to have to talk about. What about suicidal ideation? Is it because of what's going on right now or because of where you've been stuck and you filter everything? Here's one of my favorites I used to say all the time when I worked in law enforcement: the inability to feel feelings. People would tell me all the time, like, how do you deal with all this trauma that you see all the time? You're always going to somebody's worst thing. I just tell them, like, oh, it's easy, I don't feel feeling. Seemed pretty cool at the time. Turns out that's not so good for your family. And then finally, here's how I encompass realizing if maybe trauma is a problem in your life, whether it fits that word or not. I believe that our current dysfunction, so anger, anxiety, depression, guilt, they come from previous life events. Could be age 0, could be yesterday. Previous life events that left you feeling helpless and hopeless or not good enough, and usually all three. And that is what's being re-triggered today. It's not the event. I'm going to talk about a part of the brain in a minute that knows where you are in space and time. And it gets jacked up. So the trauma is present. Your brain knows that was 1 year ago, 5 years ago, 20 years ago. But what it doesn't understand is that you're still being re-triggered into helpless or hopeless and not good enough. And years ago, I thought, I'm going to have to change those terms. I can't have these type A people that come into my office really not wanting to do whatever therapy is anyway and tell them that they're helpless and hopeless and not good enough. We're brave people, right? Public safety is not all that I see, but it's about 50% because of my past. And I can't tell these folks that. But there's not one person that's ever sat on my couch and I said, it's because it left you feeling helpless, hopeless, and not good enough, and that's what's being re-triggered. Everybody on my couch goes, that's exactly how I feel when I'm at my worst. You just hit the nail on the head. That's exactly how I feel. Now, I don't think we walk around the grocery store necessarily feeling those things. But when you're at your worst, and that's what's going on, that's the true marker of what trauma does to us. So let me tell you the kind of neuroscience and neurobiology part of this, and we're going to go super deep into this. There's no test at the end, but I approach treating trauma and treating mental health conditions from this very neuroscience type of way. When I started to learn this, it really opened my eyes about what's going on and what can we do about it, instead of just placating people and making them feel better. So the problem with trauma to the brain is that the alarm system kind of gets stuck in the on position. It's always on. Let's talk about a couple of components of the brain that might make sense if you're dealing with some of this or know somebody around you that is. The amygdala, your threat detector. It does some other things. It's typically what's called the fight or flight part of the brain, part of this limbic system, right? But it's the threat detector. And it's stuck in the on position, which means everything feels like an attack. Now, maybe you've gotten yourself ready for the apocalypse or the end of the world or somebody attacking your family or hurting you. But you're still stuck thinking everything that happens to you, including the guy that cut you off, the person that bumped your cart in the grocery store, is an attack on you. You're stuck in the attack position. Vigilance is fine. Hypervigilance will kill you eventually. There's a hippocampus. Part of this brain, or part of the hippocampus, what it does is I like to think it takes like a Polaroid picture of what's going on, right? It starts the file system, eventually hands it off to some other things, but it's the brain's timestamp. It lets you know what's going on right now, and what happened in the past is in the past. But because of trauma, that hippocampus gets corrupted, and you start reliving the old pain as if it's happening right now. Maybe you don't sit there 24 hours a day, maybe it happens once a month or once a year. But many of us have those days sitting on the couch thinking some pretty dark thoughts about the stuff we should have done differently that made me helpless, hopeless, and not good enough. And then the prefrontal cortex, and this is the one we actually kind of have to work with the most. Prefrontal cortex is the front of your brain. It's on both hemispheres of your brain. This thinking brain, as I like to call it, is not fully formed until age 25. I was carrying a gun at age 21, so make of that what you want. 25, I was talking to somebody earlier today, 25 is when I called my dad and said, like, it turns out you knew what you were talking about, right? So it's the logic part of the brain, it's the thinking part of the brain, I like to call it. The problem with when trauma happens, though, is logic and reason kind of take a back seat. And this hippocampus and this amygdala become much more of a prevalent thing. The smoke alarm is constantly going off. And here's why. Listen, the body will keep the score. The brain will keep the score of the things that happen to you. Your brain's primary function is to keep you alive. Your brain's not really worried whether you like your car or your job. It likes those things. It likes serotonin and dopamine and norepinephrine and adrenaline. But job one is keep you alive. And if you look at this through that lens, it is the body and the brain's job to keep the score of everything that's happened to you so that you don't do it again, so it doesn't happen again. What this means is that trauma is not just in your mind. It's in your biology too. And we have to fix it that way. And if you don't take control, it will absolutely own you. This is why trauma feels like a life sentence. Listen, your brain's not failing you. It's predicting all the things that can go wrong. That's the brain's job, to predict what can go wrong. Many of the people in this room are proudly people that prepare for the worst, right? That's what draws a lot of people into a lot of times bear stuff, right? It is prepping for the worst that can happen. That's awesome. I do the exact same thing. But it's constantly looking for it, and it's protecting you in the wrong ways. And that becomes mentally and physically exhausting. Because think about it, if your alarm bells never shut off, if the alarm system never shuts off, you just live in fear all the time. Now, maybe you're not a scaredy cat and those words don't sound good to you about living in fear all the time. I don't know that I would have described myself in fear all the time, but my body was. My body was constantly concerned about what was going to happen next, and it was definitely an attack upon me. And your life becomes a replay of all your past pain. And again, I realize some of this may kind of hit the back wall and fall if you don't feel like you're dealing with this. Maybe this doesn't necessarily mean you replay the moments all the time. But the overreaction, the hypervigilance, the anger, the anxiety, the depression, the guilt, you're living this way all the time. We have a saying I learned from one of my mentors. I don't know if he got it from somewhere else, but neurons that fire together wire together. If I said the color red, that means something to you. Maybe it's an apple, maybe it's your favorite car that you first had, maybe it's a really negative thing. But all I said was red. It ties those things together. In fact, you didn't drive down here thinking how to change a flat tire. But now that I've said it, you've got memories of changing a flat tire. Maybe they're not scary, maybe they're not bad, but you've got memories connected to this. The neurons that fire together were wired together. You'll keep living in fear, and fear becomes the default because of the way that these come together. We got to rewire your system to change your life. So here's a little more neuroscience before we get into what we have to do about it. Trauma hijacks your nervous system and completely holds it hostage. This is a physical problem to a thing that's happened in the past. Yes, there is psychology and emotions to this, but we attack it from a very neurobiological way, and you can see why. These points that I bring up every time that I speak, this is what's going on in your head. Functional MRI scans show us that trauma actually does leave a mark. We can see it. It's not just in your head, it's in your brain functioning. We can see in those fMRIs what's working, what's not, what's firing, what shouldn't be. And there's a lot more emphasis these days on brain scans for people that are dealing with this, not to mention the TBIs and the concussions that you didn't even know you had when you fell off your bike when you were 8. Or that car wreck, which nobody really got hurt, right? Concussions and TBIs, major indicator of later traumatic stress. This amygdala, that threat detector I talked about, is in overdrive. So it makes everyday stress feel like life or death. How many times have you been told by your spouse, by a friend, by somebody else, you're making way too much out of this? Why are you on 10 all the time? Why do you only go from 0 to 10 when somebody cuts you off in traffic? I don't like to be cut off in traffic. I'm not saying that I wave at the guy and say nice remarks. But 0 to 10 is physically and mentally exhausting. And by the way, your wife's pissed in the passenger seat and the kids are crying in the back seat. Ask me how I know. I was pretty good at it, actually. That hippocampus, that filter, it can't separate the past from the present. This is a problem. It's a neurobiological issue. So you just keep reliving it. And remember that prefrontal cortex I talked about, the thinking part of the brain? It just goes offline. It leaves you reacting instead of thinking. When I started doing this, I always thought, man, guys are going to come in, they're going to be dealing with anger, their wife made them come in, right? This is what I was thinking about, mental health 10 years ago, 12 years ago. Wife made them come in, they don't want to really be here. And I have to explain to these type A guys why anger is actually bad sometimes. Now, I'm not the therapist that will tell you anger is always bad. You ever to fight somebody into the ditch to take them to jail and your backup's 40 minutes away? Anger works pretty good, right? It'll make you lift the car off somebody. It works pretty good, but it can be dangerous. So I thought I'm going to spend all this time explaining to these guys why anger is bad, why it's hurting their family. The reality is what I found out was they were just like me. The anger that's the problem is the one where you scream at your kids and wife again, you punch a hole in the wall, 15 minutes later you're sitting on the couch feeling like a piece of trash because you did the one thing that you promised you wouldn't do again. And every guy sitting on my couch, every gal sitting on my couch goes, oh yeah, it's totally right there, right? Why did we do that? We overreacted. We know 15 minutes later that we shouldn't have done that. It didn't help anything. And really, it was kind of a 5 out of 10. It's something I need to handle, but it wasn't a 10 out of 10. The prefrontal cortex goes offline, this thinking part of the brain. We used to think for a long time that it was kind of slowed down. We do know that the limbic system, this fight or flight part, is faster and stronger, especially the more trauma that you deal with. But we always felt like this prefrontal cortex is slowed down. After more MRIs, we were able to see that when the limbic system, especially the right side limbic system, your real fight or flight overreaction to emotion side is on, the left frontal dorsal prefrontal cortex is turned off. It shuts off. It doesn't even ask its opinion. It's shut off. You're not thinking. The good thing is that gives us a direction to how to make this better. These neurotransmitters get thrown all off balance because of trauma. Your dopamine drops. Your serotonin dips. Cortisol, the stress, floods your system. Do a little research on what cortisol in the long term does to your body when you don't need it. always sick, always hurting, always in pain, always stressed, can't sleep. Any of this sound familiar? So your body just becomes this living, breathing stress machine. That is what trauma does. Yes, there's flashback. Yes, there can be nightmares. Yes, there can be stress. Yes, there can be dissociation. This is what it really looks like, folks. Trauma locks the nervous system into this survival mode, as I said before, that fight, flight, or freeze, and you never learn to shut it off. And if you don't, it will kill you. Maybe not today. Maybe it just starts taking things away from you slowly, like your family or your career and your finances and your stability, but it will get you eventually. So when it takes over, that logic, that memory, that emotion, they all become disconnected from each other. You just become reactive, you become erratic, and you become exhausted. Now, after all that, here's the good news. This is a fixable problem. So what do we have to do? Because there's long-term impacts of this. The hypervigilance that I talked about, that always looking for the next threat, even when there isn't one, this isn't just a I can handle it once in a while issue. This is a long-term issue. You have emotional chaos, that anger, the pain, the numbness that I bragged about. Your brain is throwing every survival mechanism it has at you at all times. Memory distortion. I can't remember anything. I can't remember as much as I did. I have short-term or long-term memory loss. I go places and I can't even remember why I went there. The past invades the present. Makes that healing very difficult. There's chronic health problems. All of these neurotransmitters get jacked up. How many times your doctor's gone, maybe you're dealing with a heart issue and he said, you've got to get less stress in your life. Right? Maybe there's other things we need to do for that too, but they may be right. And trauma's just not psychological. The adrenaline and the cortisol flood your system. When you're having these reactions, it'll wear down your heart. You only get one of those. It jacks up your immune system. You used to be the healthy person, and it'll jack up your brain function. I can think of very few things that sound scarier to me than a jacked up heart and a brain not hurting. But can it heal? Yeah, it can. But it's not going to be by accident. Healing, like anything else, like any physical condition, is going to be a fight. You either win or you let trauma run your whole life and let it run away from you. We have this very cool thing that we were created with, in my opinion. We were created, and there's neuroplasticity. It's a real thing. It's your brain's ability to adapt and change and learn new things and adapt to its environment. You see animals do this, right? We have a little higher order function. Well, most humans have a higher order function than animals do. But your brain can change, but you're going to have to force it to do it. It is going to take some change. There are interventions, like I mentioned before, EMDR. The first time I saw EMDR, it has to do with the actual different hemispheres of the brain, how we process things and reactivating parts of the memory system and the neuroplasticity that will let us deal with these things that keep coming up. And I thought it was the weirdest thing I've ever seen in my life, and I refused to have anything to do with it. And then I went to a conference and watched an officer who had been dealing with a absolutely tragic situation for 13 years in his head. In 30 minutes, they had done what was taking me 3 minutes to do with talk therapy. And I was invested after that. In fact, it helped me and saved my life. But these physiological recalibrations, EMDR is not sitting in the memory. That's not what I'm trying to get across to you. You don't have to sit and think about it and try to make it better. What happened to you is terrible. It's horrible. It's not going to work. Of course it made you feel helpless and not good enough. But you can't prove that today. And there's different ways that we need to do, or that we can make this change. Let me explain just a little bit. A lot of people think, and we're kind of taught this along the way, and it makes sense. The way that your brain works is we get information in, we toil it around in our little supercomputer, and then we spit out an action or an emotion or a reply. Well, that's true if you're taking your time to think about changing your job. Can we afford to go do this? Did I bring everything I needed for Sunday? Right? Of course you think about that. But that is the reaction model. And the reaction model, if it's all you had, will get you killed. You'll slam into every car that hits its brakes in front of you. You'll never respond when things are about to hit you. You'll never get yourself out of a dangerous situation because you're still just waiting to react to it. What really happens in the brain is it constantly gets information from our 5 senses about right now, and then about right now, and then about right now. That's all it knows. That's all it really knows is right now. And it makes a prediction, not a response. It makes a prediction about what's going on and what do we need to do about this. And it's very fast. And it does that based on your past experiences of your life. What's going on here? What do we need to do about it? Move now. Do it now, right? And it doesn't even have to be traumatic, right? When you came to the door, the back of this audience room, when you came to the door, there was a handle. And your brain said, I've seen these before. I'm gonna grab the handle, pull the handle, I'll probably open and I'll walk in. But it might not have worked. It thought that because that's worked before, but other things could have happened. You could have pulled the handle and it was locked. You could have been hit by static electricity when you touched it. There could have been somebody coming out when you were coming in and it startled you, right? Not major things, these aren't huge things, but your brain now had to make a new prediction about what to do. Am I at the wrong door? Am I too early? Am I too late? What did I screw up? What did they screw up? I should have shuffled my feet on the floor. I always get static electricity when I'm in dry areas like this. Oh, I need to move out of his way, or he needs to move out of my way. No big deal. Makes predictions. Here's the good thing about that, is we can change our ability to see those predictions. The handle on the door is kind of an easy scenario. But what we have to give you is newer, safer life experiences when dealing with that event that show you that you're not still in the middle of that event. There's different ways to do this. I have my own favorites. But we have to get the brain to, no kidding, rewire itself. How do you think you got screwed up? Rewiring. What are we gonna have to do? Rewire it again. One of my longtime mentors used to say, how did you get so jacked up? Practice, practice, practice. How are you gonna get unjacked up? Practice, 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 right? You made your own animal. You're a beast for a reason, right? We're gonna have to undo it. So interventions like EMDR, like a structured exposure, not seeing it. One of the things Luke talked about me getting my second doctorate, one of the things that I'm focusing on for this research is virtual reality and EMDR for trauma. It's coming around, it's being used in some places like the VA for exposure therapy. I wanna see what else we can do with it. I really want to see what I'm expecting. My hypothesis is that it makes some faster major changes in people that are dealing with trauma. So I'm all in on it. This is what my entire research is gonna be about for this doctorate. But it's another type of just rewiring your brain, right? And it doesn't happen overnight. I told that story earlier about seeing a guy in 30 minutes doing better than what I was doing with 3 months. He still had a long way to go. But suddenly he wasn't seeing or smelling the event or hearing it. And that may not describe the thing that you're dealing with. But you know what he didn't feel for the first time in 10 years? Helpless, hopeless, and not good enough, which are really nice words for what he was really feeling. We have to introduce newer, safer experiences to make the prediction part of the brain go, we can handle this. This is scary, but we can handle this. You did it driving here. You did it deciding if you had the money to come here, what equipment to bring. It just wasn't an emergency. And an emergency is doing the same thing. We have to give your brain new experiences to make it realize I'm not in trouble all the time. So that your brain rewires itself, as crazy as that sounds, and rewires itself for resilience instead of survival. There are some things in your life you can probably talk yourself into resilience. Hey, you know what? We turned out okay. If your kid comes home and says something terrible happened, they didn't make the team, or somebody said something to them, you honestly tell them with evidence, hey, that's terrible and my heart breaks for you, but we're gonna be okay here, right? Because what does the teenager that didn't make the basketball team say? I'm terrible, I'm worthless, I'm no good, nobody ever talked to me, it's horrible, right? Just like we did. Basketball's a bad example, I'm 5'7", but so it wasn't me crying about that. But we tell them with evidence, I don't think this means you're a piece of trash. I think this sucks, right? But for the traumatic event that gets stuck, you can't seem to talk yourself into that because you've tried it for a long time. The brain is a response model, it's a prediction model, not a response model. We have to get that resiliency back. The neuroplasticity, changing the way that you think, changing the way that you see these experiences, changing the way that your brain constantly goes into survival mode and shows you anger, anxiety, depression, guilt. It's the key to rewiring the brain after trauma. We have to give the brain new data, new information than the crappy, broken, victim, terrible data that you have right now. Otherwise, your brain will always default to fear. Every single time. Maybe you're tough and you can handle it, but I promise you it's tearing things apart. Coping is not healing. Coping can be important. I'm not going to take it away from anybody, but it's not healing. Stop mistaking one of those for the other. Healing begins when you reclaim control of all this. Over your body, the physical, over your emotions, and over your mind. But you're not powerless. So let me start to close with this. Because we've talked about what it is, what causes it, and I wish I could give you a 10-step program of how to leave here today and it all be better. You might have to seek professional help. You might have to just do some research about how to get my brain to have new experiences and expose myself to difficult things so that I know I'm not in trouble all the time. Trauma reshapes the brain, but luckily for you, so does the healing. Your past does not get to decide your future. You do. And that's not a motivational speech. I have zero interest in just motivating you to feel better. You actually can reshape the brain. You actually can decide your own future, but muttering around in it, just being the victim is not going to work. You're just going to stay there. You're not broken. You are built for resilience. I just showed you how. I just showed you why we know you're built for resilience, but resilience is a choice. You're going to have to choose to get better, and you're going to have to change those neural pathways. You either train your mind or your trauma trains it for you. You pick. Choose wisely. This is not today just about understanding trauma. It's about what to do next. And again, I wish I could give you 10 bullet points. It took me a whole lot of school to figure out how to, even in the beginning, minuscule differences in people dealing with it. Now I'm very fortunate that I've done it for a long time and I get to see major changes. There's no 10-step program. There's no self-help book you can read. Trust me, I'd write it and be rich. You've been given the knowledge, so now it's time for your action. There's no 10-step program. Do you have to reach out to somebody? Do you have to figure out how this works? It's literally why I went to school. You don't have to go to college for it. I'll teach you. This is literally why I went to school, to figure out what the heck is wrong with me and how the heck is it going to be fixed. You owe it to yourself and the people that count on you, more importantly, in my opinion. But you also owe it to yourself to get better, to get stronger, and refuse to stay stuck in all the BS that you're going through. The anger, the anxiety, the depression, the guilt. You have everything you need to rewire your brain. Take control of your life and win this fight. Get your ass after it. That's all I have.
Would you mind taking a moment for questions? Hey, we have one right here.
Why the name The Angry Viking?
That's a great question. So, I was out of law enforcement at this point. I was doing my doctorate, and when you do a doctorate, it's a small group. It's not a big group at the college. It's usually 5, 10, 12, 20 people. So we all know each other pretty well. And at the time, the dean of the program, he was turned around writing something on the board, and he asked a question out loud, and I answered it. And he turned around and said, who answered that? And somebody across the room said, the Angry Viking looking dude over there. And so it stuck. I went to a business marketing group, and they're like, you got to brand yourself. I'm like, I don't know if it would be called that. Like, shouldn't it be like the Wilkins Trauma Institute or something? Something all official. And the guy's like, no, you're the Angry Viking therapist now. So it's literally trademarked now. So, yeah.
I love it. I think it worked.
Yeah.
Any other questions here? Oh, I see a couple hands. He's the closest, then I'll get you. And then...
Not a question, but a comment. First of all, thank you for all that. Be transformed by the renewing of your mind. right? I never thought of, or I used to think it was some kind of spiritual concept, but learning some of this stuff, it actually puts more physical stuff that we can do to that. So thank you.
Yeah, it's a great comment. And you're right, I think it can be both, right? It can be a spiritual thing, absolutely. I lean on it, right? When I'm so, like, this is my area of expertise. And when maybe not for myself as much anymore, not that I'm, do everything right, but not so much, but when I'm 30 minutes before a speech or 10 minutes before a really hard session in my office that I know is going to be really tough, like, there's a spiritual component to that too. I got to lean on that understanding, because I've got some of the answers, but I don't know their answers, right? I'm very confident in the things, and any of you watch any of the videos that I'm on with TJ or whatever, I'm saying a lot of the same things, and it's all bullet points up here, not a speech, because I believe in every piece of it. So even with that in mind, sometimes it has to be spiritual for me too, right? That's the thing that I learned the most from this group, even the people in this group. So yeah, and I always say, like, and I never claim to be the most theologically sound person, right? I lean on TJ for that one, but yes, God can heal you. Yes, He does heal you. Sometimes He wants you to go to the doctor too. I think He put them there for a reason. Like, I hope He didn't let me go through all this for no reason.
So this might be a little deeper question than is appropriate for these circumstances, but as someone who has gone through a lot of things that you've talked about and who has seen therapy, REBT and EMDR, they sound ridiculous, but they really are effective. That said, is there any considerations someone who's also autistic might expect in that journey?
Yeah, it's a great question. And here, I'm not an autism expert, I gotta say. Like, I understand it in the general terms in which I'm trained in it. But here's what I love about EMDR so much, is that as the clinician, I don't need the details, right? You don't have to tell me the details. If you want to tell me details, I'll help you, right? I'll listen, right? But the whole point of that processing is, in short, we're reactivating the memory and providing bilateral stimulation that helps calm the brain. That's dual processing, right? All fancy words to get that event. And what happens typically in differing words and differing ways, what happens in those events in EMDR therapy is people come out on the end of it like, I can still see it, but it just doesn't punch me in the face anymore, right? Some people will tell you it's in black and white back here. I can still see it, right? But a very good friend of mine, years after a big traumatic incident came in, and he's perfectly fine with me telling this story, even if I don't identify him. He was the first to get to a plane crash that killed 49 out of 50 people. We were both working that day. Very traumatic thing back when I was still in public safety. And again, he gives me the permission to say that. He said what EMDR did is it almost put this will age you, right? He says it put a Snapchat filter on it, which I thought that was a really good explanation when I was saying things very clinically. Yeah, so the autism piece, here's where I think it fits is, yes, there's thought to EMDR. Yes, there's the ability to kind of process things. But what we're really doing, and why I think it's the better modality of all of them, even if I'm a little biased, admittedly, because I've seen it work and it helped me, is that I don't believe that the dual attention that it causes and the slowing the physical reactions, right? I don't know that those would be massively negatively affected by autism. Now, maybe at an extreme level of symptoms, right? But those things we're causing are not, I'll use air quotes even though I hate it, they're not thinking yourself through the trauma, right? It's calming the systems that your brain can go, you know what, that was horrible, but we're all right? And so I've very successfully treated many people dealing with autism. Again, if it's to a nonverbal, can't take care of themselves point, like maybe that's a little different. I'm not going to pretend that that's the fix for all things, but I would expect great things through things like EMDR. In fact, it's the other way that might be more difficult, the things like the rational and motor behavior therapy, the REBT, the CBT, where it's very important, but we're trying to change you cognitively to think differently to change your behaviors, right? That might actually be more difficult than EMDR, I would say.
think we have time for just one more. If there is one more, and there's one in the back. Okay, oh, there's one over there. Well, we'll see how quick this one goes. Maybe we can get to both. But no more.
Doc, would you expand on the compare and contrast of coping versus healing and what the process going from one to the other looks like?
Yeah, I mean, that's a good question. So when I use those terms, coping is just getting through it, right? And there are many things in your life that you just have to get through, right? I mean, just saying that, coping and getting through stuff, like I got flooded with things in my life and things that I've seen other people go through because of what I do in my office and online, that sometimes we just got to cope with it. I'll tell you a quick example. I had a gentleman years ago that's taught me a lot. He came in and he said, and some of these are sensitive subjects, so just be aware. And he said, I just lost my wife to cancer last year. She did the books for my business, so my business failed and it's closed. I went bankrupt. My kids won't talk to me anymore because their inheritance is gone. And I just found out that I also have cancer, and I think I'm very depressed, right? Bro, you're not depressed. You got a lot of bad stuff going on, right? I'm going to help, obviously. We got to get through this. At that moment, we're probably not healing trauma or healing an emotional reaction, right? Right now, that guy's got to cope with all this stuff going on. And I absolutely have ways to help with that. And so does the brain, so does the body, so do people that aren't therapists can help you with that. That to me is more coping, right? When it gets dangerous, even though it has to happen, right? Especially talking about a lifetime of trauma or high-risk careers. There were plenty of times in my career that I pushed that stuff down with my boot and went to the next call, right? Which I think that's necessary. I don't think it's necessarily wrong. Coping is very short-term to me. I don't think it's wrong. I just think it's short-term and you're not actually healing in the long run. Now, the danger, I think, just coming from a question, the danger, I think, can be maybe you have a healthy coping mechanism. Some of you have very unhealthy ones. So do I. Even if it's a healthy one, it's going to come back later. You didn't actually take care of the problem, right? AA is not an example of coping, but stick with me a second. I love AA. It's helped millions of people. I'm not going to in any way knock it. I love that it's helped people. One of the phenomenon that we know about AA is, and maybe you've seen this if you've been around it, like it's very good at making you stop drinking, realize you don't need to drink, gives you rewards and a sponsor, and like you stop drinking, you realize that maybe I don't need it. Awesome. How many people have you seen get to 20 years sober and completely fall off the wagon, crash, right? Now, maybe something new's going on in their life, maybe something hard's happened again. I would argue that for some of those people, we didn't take care of the issue in the first place. Again, that is in no way a negate about any of that program. I think it's great, it's helped millions of people. But if we didn't heal the issue, I feel like it's always waiting to rear its ugly head. And you might get lucky, but if you don't heal it, it's always waiting. And I think that alone is exhausting, the always waiting.
All right, so last year I got to talk to you for like 2 minutes, and it was amazing. I had lost my brother to suicide in June of 2023, and EMDR changed my life and saved my life because I was stuck in this depression and reliving the whole day over and over again. Like I remember sitting here and just sobbing when you were talking. Now, one thing that I don't know if anybody else struggles with this, like I'm not reliving the day anymore, but when I don't hear from my husband or my mom or my father or somebody for an extended period of time, then my brain starts to go into, oh my gosh, are they alive? Did they kill themselves too? And I don't know if that would be like the exposure therapy or something like that, because I don't know, like when someone's in that situation, you healed one thing, but now is that another EMDR? Is that something different? Like,
yeah. No, I would argue that's EMDR. I promise somebody eye contact with you. I can't see anything, but yeah, to me it would be EMDR. Here's one of the things that even EMDR therapists fell at, including myself when I was new at it. I didn't come out perfect. EMDR is really threefold. It's past, present, and future. It's dealing with the past events, dealing with the present symptoms, and the future of what this stuff typically causes, right? Being able to get through events that are going to remind you of this. We're not going to take away from them not calling or not being home or can't get home. We're not going to take this concern away from that, right? We want to take the overwhelming physical and mental fear away from that happens, right? So it's threefold. What EMDR typically gets used for and does its best work, admittedly, is processing the past, because it does affect your current and future. Man, I hate to go over time, but I'll give you an example. So I worked with a gentleman. Again, any story I ever tell, I have permission to do so. This gentleman had been in a couple of shootings. He was in law enforcement, and he became extremely physically and mentally paranoid. He was carrying a backpack of food of multiple days and extra weapons. And he went from the bravest dude at the state to paranoid, right? And we did EMDR. It was life-changing for him. It involved around a shooting and feeling like they were coming after him again. And then I didn't hear from him for probably, 5-6 months, which is usually a good sign. And he makes an appointment one day, and it's been a while, so I'm hoping he's just checking in, making sure everything's still okay, getting some advice. And he feels like he's back to paranoid again. And so we spent the whole hour trying to figure out why. Did something happen? Was there a radio call? Was there? And we don't always chase down triggers. I was just running out of things that might connect these two, right? Because there's a billion triggers that could happen to you. So we finished up the session. I'm like, man, we're going to figure this out. Stick with me. We're going to figure this out. Let's get you back in here next week. And he said, well, I can't do next Tuesday. Next Tuesday, I'm going to headquarters. I'm getting a bravery award for the shooting. It's like, I'm going to stand. So you're going to stand on stage, and they're going to read the bravery citation and pin a medal on you. And you don't think that this is bothering you, right? And obviously, with a future template, got on top of it. He was fine. EMDR future templates. As a consultant, I have failed to do it. I have failed to teach people to do it. I'm not perfect. That is an area that helps with the future part of it, because we're not going to make the scary thing not be scary. I just don't want the overreaction. I don't want that limbic system going into fight or flight. I want you nervous, which still stinks, right? I want you nervous instead of in massive fear. And that's where I think it does its work on future stuff.
I think that's all the time we have for questions. Thank you, sir.
Yep.